You've probably heard that the break-even age for CPP is 74. Take it at 60, live to 74, and you've come out ahead. That sounds like a reasonable way to think about it. But that number is built on a flawed assumption. And once you see the flaw, the whole calculation changes. The standard math puts it this way: $965 a month at 60, or $1,508 a month at 65. Those two lines cross at around age 74. Simple, clean, wrong. Here's what's missing. That calculation ignores inflation indexing and wage growth, two forces that quietly widen the gap between early and late claimers with every passing year. When you fold those in, the real break-even age isn't 74. It's closer to 82, an 8-year difference. And it means taking CPP at 60 could cost you up to $60,000 in lifetime income, even if you only live to average life expectancy. Most people don't know this because most calculators don't show it. That $60,000 figure doesn't come from an extreme scenario. It comes from the actual difference in what a 60-year-old claimer and a 70-year-old claimer receive over a 25-year retirement once inflation and wage adjustments are built in. So today we're going to walk through the real math, what it actually costs to take CPP early, why the invest the difference strategy is riskier than it sounds, and a clear framework for making this decision based on your own situation. If you're a Canadian between 55 and 65 trying to figure out when to take CPP, this channel was built for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the full breakdown. The default advice is leaving real money on the table. Now let's start with where the standard math breaks down. Let's start with the numbers most people are working from. The CPP maximum at age 65 in 2026 is $1,508 a month. Take it at 60 instead, and you lose 0.6% for every month before 65. That's 60 months, which works out to a 36% reduction. Your payment drops to $965 a month. Take it at 70, and you gain 0.7% per month past 65. Another 60 months, this time adding 42% to the base. Your payment becomes $2,141 a month. Most people are with me so far. The standard break-even between starting at 60 versus starting at 65 puts the crossover at around age 74. Start at 60, collect 14 years of lower payments, and by 74 you've built up enough total income to pull ahead of someone who waited. That's the math on every CPP comparison chart. And it's not wrong, it's just missing two variables. Here's what it leaves out. CPP payments are indexed to inflation automatically, every year. But there's a second adjustment that almost nobody mentions. The benefit amount available to late claimers grows with the yearly maximum pensionable earnings, the YMPE, which has historically increased about 1% per year above inflation. So the late claimer isn't just receiving a higher base amount indexed to the cost of living. The gap between them and the early claimer widens with every year that passes. When you model that out over 25 years, using conservative assumptions, not optimistic ones, the real break-even between starting at 60 versus 65 shifts from age 74 to somewhere around 82. That's 8 more years. It's a detail that never shows up on a one-page comparison chart. A 60-year-old who lives to 85, which is statistically realistic for a healthy non-smoker, ends up collecting roughly $60,000 less in lifetime income than someone who waited. If you've been running this math without those two adjustments, you're not alone. Most calculators online don't include them. Most conversations with friends and coworkers don't either. The system doesn't correct that gap for you. Statistics Canada data puts life expectancy at age 65 at 19.7 additional years for men and 22.3 years for women. That means the average woman retiring today is still alive well into her late 80s. For everyone in that longer half of the distribution, the compounding effect of inflation indexing and YMPE growth is working against the early claimer for decades. Now, here's where a lot of people think they see a way around this. What if I take CPP at 60 and invest every payment? I'll beat the break even with decent returns. That sounds reasonable. It's also where the second trap comes in. To make that strategy work, you'd need to consistently earn more than 8.4% per year after tax and after fees, without a significant down year in the early part of retirement. A balanced Canadian portfolio has historically returned around 5.5% per year in real terms. That's already short. And in retirement, a bad sequence of returns early on can do permanent damage to your portfolio that a later recovery won't fully repair. CPP deferral is a guaranteed return. Investing early CPP payments is not. They're fundamentally different kinds of risk, and the mistake most people make is treating them as if they're the same. In the next section, I'll show you exactly why that guaranteed return is so hard to match, and why it reframes the entire decision. So here's the reframe that changes how most people look at this decision. CPP deferral isn't just a timing choice, it's a guaranteed return. For every year you delay past 65, your benefit grows by 8.4%. That's 0.7% per month, 12 months a year, locked in for life and indexed to inflation. No market volatility, no management fees, no sequence of returns risk. That's the actual structure of what's on offer. I used to think taking CPP early and investing the difference was a no-brainer. Early in my career, I actually pointed clients in that direction. Then, I ran the numbers with inflation factored in and realized I had been costing people tens of thousands of dollars. I changed my thinking, and I want you to have the full picture before you make this call. Think about what it takes to beat 8.4% guaranteed. A balanced Canadian portfolio, roughly 60% equities and 40% fixed income, has historically returned around 5.5% per year in real terms. That already falls short of the deferral bonus. Add in management fees, the taxes you pay on RRIF withdrawals later, and the permanent damage a bad early retirement market can do, and the gap gets even harder to close. The other thing worth remembering is that CPP deferral is permanent. Once you lock in your start date and begin collecting the higher amount, it compounds with inflation for the rest of your life. There's no market correction that cuts it in half. There's no bad year that takes a chunk off the top. That stability is what makes it so valuable in a retirement plan that could run 25 to 30 years. For most retirees, the invest the different strategy looks better on paper than it performs in practice. I remember sitting with a client, a retired teacher named Diane, who was completely set on taking CPP at 60. Her reason was simple. She didn't trust the government. She was convinced they'd change the rules before she got her share, so she wanted the money in hand now. She had about $200,000 in her RRSP and no pension beyond CPP. We ran the full comparison. Take CPP at 60 and invest every payment, versus delay to 70 and draw down the RRSP as bridge income in the meantime. When you play that out over 25 years with realistic assumptions, the delay strategy put more than $80,000 extra in her pocket. She understood the numbers clearly. She took early CPP anyway. That choice wasn't about math, it was about trust. And I'm not here to argue against her. The skepticism toward government programs is real, and it's deeply rooted for a lot of Canadians. But consider what the deferral bonus actually is. A guaranteed 8.4% annual return, indexed to inflation, backed by the CPP Investment Board, one of the most well-funded, independently managed pension reserves in the world. Using that deferral isn't naive trust in the government. It's using the most secure part of the system to maximum effect. There are two ways this plays out. The fragility path takes CPP at 60. You get $965 a month starting now. Your guaranteed income for life is lower. Your portfolio carries more of the weight, and a poor stretch of market returns early in retirement is difficult to recover from. Your spouse also inherits a smaller survivor benefit. The resilience path delays CPP to 65 or 70 and uses RRSPs, TFSAs, or other savings as bridge income in the meantime. Your guaranteed income for life is substantially higher. Your portfolio takes on less risk. Your survivor protection for your spouse is stronger. And drawing down your RRSP in your 60s, while your taxable income is lower, can reduce the hit in your 70s, when RRIF minimum withdrawals kick in and can push income into OAS clawback territory. Neither path is free of trade-offs, but one carries a guaranteed 8.4% annual reward for every year you wait past 65. The other doesn't. And if you're wondering what happens if you die before you ever reach that break-even, that fear is real, and it's worth stress testing with actual numbers. Now let's address the fear that actually drives most early CPP decisions. Your friend died at 64, or your father passed before he ever collected a single payment. You've watched it happen close to home, and you've decided you're not going to take the same chance. That response is understandable and completely human. It's also one of the most common reasons Canadians end up with a retirement income structure that costs them far more than they realize. Let's put numbers to it. If you take CPP at 60 and die at 64, you've collected about 4 years of payments. At $965 a month, that's roughly $46,000 total. If you had waited and died at 64, you'd collect nothing in retirement. In that specific scenario, taking early is clearly the right call. You received income you would have otherwise left on the table. The question is whether that scenario should anchor the entire decision. Statistics Canada's life tables put the probability of a 60-year-old man reaching age 85 at roughly 40%. For women, it's closer to 55%. A healthy 60-year-old woman has better than even odds of living long enough to see the full benefit of delaying CPP. And among Canadians who reach 65, roughly half will outlive whatever the averages suggest. If you take CPP at 60 and live to 85, the comparison shifts significantly. The early claimer has collected 25 years of lower payments, $965 a month, indexed to inflation, but starting from a smaller base. Someone who waited to 70 started with $2,141 a month and has been collecting for 15 years on that larger base. The cumulative gap between those two income streams can exceed $100,000 in the late claimer's favor. Most people planning for retirement are more worried about running out of money than about leaving payments on the table. Longevity risk, the possibility of living longer than your savings can carry you, is a far more common problem in Canadian retirements than dying before you can collect. CPP deferral is one of the few tools that directly addresses that risk with a guaranteed inflation-protected income stream for life. I don't know your health history. I'm not a doctor. And there are real situations where taking CPP at 60 is the right answer. I'll lay those out clearly in the next section. But for a healthy 60-year-old from a family with a track record of longevity, using a worst-case scenario as the primary input to this decision is working against you. A more practical framework is a simple health assessment. If you have a serious chronic condition with a clear impact on life expectancy, say diabetes with complications, advanced heart disease, or significant mobility limitations, taking CPP early is likely the better call. You'll collect more total income that way. If you're in good or even average health with no strong warning signals, the probability math points the other way. And if the picture is mixed, the break-even analysis from earlier gives you the framework to work through it. One more thing worth noting. CPP isn't just your retirement income, it also becomes a survivor benefit for your spouse. A lower CPP payment means a lower survivor benefit left behind when you die, regardless of when that happens. In the next section, we'll look at exactly what that difference amounts to for a couple. Because for a lot of families, that calculation changes the conversation entirely. So let's bring it down to a practical decision. There are 3 realistic paths for when to take CPP, and the right one depends on your specific situation, not on what's most common, and not on what any default comparison suggests. Take CPP at 60 if you have a serious health condition that meaningfully shortens your life expectancy. If your doctor has given you a clear picture suggesting you're unlikely to reach your mid-70s, taking early is rational. You'll almost certainly collect more total income that way. Taking at 60 also makes sense if you urgently need the cash flow to avoid high-interest debt or to protect savings you can't afford to draw down. Wait until 65 if you're in average health, have no strong financial need to take earlier, and want to keep the decision simple. The static break-even is around age 74, and if you're in reasonable health, you have a good chance of reaching it. Waiting to 65 also gives you a significantly better survivor benefit compared to starting at 60, without requiring you to bridge 5 full years on your own savings. Delay to 70 if you're in good health, have RRSPs, TFSAs, or other savings that can carry you through the gap, and want the highest possible guaranteed income for life. The difference between $965 a month at 60 and $2,141 a month at 70 is not a small gap. That's more than $14,000 a year in additional guaranteed income, indexed to inflation, for the rest of your life. It dramatically reduces how much you're asking your portfolio to do. Now let's talk about the survivor benefit, because this is where the decision becomes a household calculation rather than an individual one. CPP survivor pensions pay up to 60% of the deceased's CPP amount to a surviving spouse who is 65 or older. That percentage is applied to whatever the deceased was actually receiving. At 60, with a monthly benefit of $965, the maximum survivor pension your spouse could receive is around $579 a month. At 70, with a monthly benefit of $2,141 that climbs to around $1,285 a month. The difference is more than $700 a month, or roughly $8,500 per year, for every year your spouse outlives you. Consider a straightforward example. A couple, both age 60. The husband is the higher earner. He delays to 70 and starts collecting $2,141 a month. He passes away at 75. His wife now receives $1,285 a month from his CPP for the rest of her life. If he had taken CPP at 60 instead, she'd be receiving $579 a month. The annual difference is more than $8,500. That compounds year after year for however long she lives. And women in Canada, on average, live longer. When you're working through the CPP timing question, work through it as a household. The higher earner delaying tends to provide the most long-term protection for both people, especially if one spouse outlives the other by a significant margin. Here's where to start. Get your CPP statement from Service Canada. It shows your projected benefit at 60, 65, and 70 based on your actual contribution history, not a theoretical maximum. Assess your health and your family history honestly. If you have a spouse, run the survivor benefit numbers together. And if you're planning to draw from RRSPs before 70, have a rough sense of whether those savings can carry you without running short. If you want a deeper breakdown of how to coordinate CPP and OAS timing together, subscribe and hit the bell. That comparison is coming up next. Let's bring this all together. The standard break-even calculation for CPP says 74, but once you account for inflation indexing and YMPE growth, the real number is closer to 82. That 8-year shift changes the entire framing of this decision. CPP deferral isn't just a timing choice. It's a guaranteed 8.4% annual return, indexed to inflation, for life. No balanced portfolio matches that on a risk-adjusted basis, and most Canadians who take CPP at 60 aren't doing it because the math supports it. They're doing it out of fear, out of distrust, or because the default advice points there. There are real cases where taking early is the right call, a serious health condition, no bridge savings, a cash flow need that won't wait. Those situations are valid, and they exist. But defaulting to 60 or 65 without running the real numbers first is leaving money on the table. The question isn't just when do you break even. The question is what your guaranteed income floor looks like at each age, and what that means for the person you leave behind. If you found this useful, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Are you planning to take CPP at 60, 65, or 70? I read everyone. The goal isn't to die with the biggest CPP check. It's to have the most money during the years you can actually enjoy it, and to protect the person you leave behind. Plan accordingly.